and bienvenidos to this panel discussion on Mexican-Minnesota contributions to this state's culture, commerce, and communities. As the proud daughter of a Mexican immigrant myself, I'm particularly pleased to be able to bring you a distinguished panel to talk about this. And our first one is going to be Maria Cristina Tadera, who is an artist and director of the Trio McNair Scholars Program at Augsburg. Go quickly.
I had 10 minutes and I have 5. So my father studied in UNAM in Mexico City and met my mother, and he's from St. Paul, Patrick James O'Brien, born on St. Patrick's Day, and he brought her here to lovely Minnesota. I come from a long line of artists. My great-grandfather was a printer in Michoacan, and my relatives are all photographers, printmakers, painters, and silversmiths. So I became fascinated with the culture of Mexico and went back and forth my whole life, and especially with Posada, Jose Guadalupe Posada, and his relief prints and how he would tell stories about the culture and what was happening in Mexico during the time that he was producing his art. So I started creating my own woodblock prints, which were based on oral histories that were often told, shared verbally, and I wanted to document them visually. And at the same time, in my position at Augsburg University, I work with students preparing them for graduate school, but I was thinking a lot about eligibility requirements and how you had to be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, and that the focus was on those students that were low-income, first generation, and underrepresented in graduate school. So as I looked at my prints and thought about how they fit into telling stories about lives, and how they sometimes even promoted stereotypes or gender roles, I started thinking about these different classifications in the United States and how we have to determine who we are and how we fit into our society here. And so I was looking at paintings that are from 17th century, where the government of Spain actually started creating paintings showing what would happen if you were to mix with someone of a different race or from a different area as they started to venture into the New World. And so, for instance, an Español and someone of indigenous descent would become mestizo, which is probably the largest part of Mexico today. However, these classifications were usually used in a negative sense to take away rights or access to certain privileges in the New World. And so my artwork and screen printing shifted slightly, and I started to incorporate the history of Mexico and how it had been portrayed. So here is a painting that was done, and now I am transforming it into a screen print. And it was based originally to create the positive story of the first mestizo-born baby from Cortez and his indigenous slave, La Malinche. So then my artwork used humor to try to make fun of some of these stereotypes and classifications, such as this one that's called In Search of Pancho Villa. And I found it really interesting that a lot of Mexicans could identify someone just by their mustache. The bottom right one is actually not Mexican. It's Orlando Cruz, and I love when young people say, that looks like the actor. And I said, it is, but with a Sharpie, he's now Pancho Villa. And so some of the works actually talk about DNA. This is Rarotonga. I draw a lot from comics, from games, from different published items from Mexico, and then I incorporate it together. And this is a commentary on DNA and how could Rarotonga, who is a comic character from the 70s, actually have green eyes and Afrocentric and various type classifications of roots. So then I'm looking now more at immigration issues, and I'm currently working on an exhibition caravan in Concordia, which is a group of artists here in the Twin Cities. And so this today is perfect as I try to explore different topics and combine the different prints together to tell the different legends that are currently contemporary in this time. So part of my community organizing here in the Twin Cities has been to help. Many years it took to get the statue of Emiliano Zapata. It was actually a donation from the Morelos government because the largest population in Minnesota is from Morelos. And we worked together with Minneapolis, Cuernavaca, the capital city of Morelos, and the Sister Cities Project with many people in the community to establish on 1200 Lake Street a statue of Zapata and the Plaza Centenario. I also work as an independent curator, as I find it really important here, and I've brought exhibitions from Mexico, such as Artemio Rodriguez when he was here for the 2010 celebration for 2010, 1910, and 1810, celebrating Mexican revolution and independence here in the Twin Cities at McAllister College. And then again, I found that there were less women being exhibited in Mexico and the United States of Mexican descent. So I curated an international exhibition here at High Point Center for Printmaking and selected 9 artists from around Mexico to show the artworks of printmaking that's being done currently. And these are the artists that are in Oaxaca, and they now have opened up their own female-only studios in Oaxaca. And then in academia, I think it's important also to incorporate the institutions that are established in the art world, and I've worked to create, for the Frida Kahlo exhibition at the Walker Arts Center, I published the most comprehensive exhibition history of Frida Kahlo, which I think is beneficial to Mexico and the United States. And there were over 110,000 people that saw the Frida Kahlo exhibition at the Walker. And I have been working with the Minneapolis Institute of Arts to highlight the artworks that they have from Latin America and Latinx artists in hopes that there's more purchases made to the collection. And so I'm trying to publish more articles about the art produced in both countries. And so last but not least, I think it's also important to highlight Mexican and Latino artists in the United States in Mexico, and was last year invited to curate an exhibition at the Casa de Cultura in Mexico City, and the exhibition is called Migrarte, and it was about, obviously, migration. And so there were 4 artists from Minnesota, and I combined those artists with artists from across the country here in the United States. Sorry, it was pretty fast, quick, but thank you so much.
Thank you. I can particularly relate to the mustache exhibit. My uncle was nicknamed El Bigote because he had a very Pancho Villa-like mustache. And next up, I'd like to introduce Irma Marquez Trapero. And each of them will get 5 minutes to speak, and then we'll start the discussion, and I look forward to your good questions to ask of them.
Great, thank you. 5 minutes on the contributions of Mexicans in Minnesota. So I'll start with my story. Oftentimes we can get into statistics and numbers, but there's also something very unique and special of putting a face to who we are. I am a proud immigrant of Culiacán, Sinaloa, Mexico, which is, yes, which is a state on the western northern part of Mexico. The reason why my family migrated is definitely not unique to my story. There was a lot of struggles happening in my hometown, and ultimately, due to lack of resources and opportunities, my family decided to come to Minnesota. We had an uncle in St. James, Minnesota, which is a rural town about 2 hours south of the Twin Cities, and he migrated there because in the early 1980s there was a large recruitment of workers for a lot of meat packaging plants that were opening up in southern Minnesota, in greater Minnesota area. So my uncle was one of the first waves to come and work in those meat packaging plants. And at that time, my uncle said, come to St. James, work for about 2 years, save enough money, and then go back. And that was really the original plan. I was 9 years old, so we were fortunate enough to have our visas and our passports. And we crossed and drove from California, where our uncle picked us up, all the way to Minnesota in December of 1999. And that really became my home. And ultimately what ended up happening was that my parents separated, and my mom, as a single mom, decided to stay and raise us here because of more opportunities than we would have in Mexico. And also at that moment, there was a large violence due to the Sinaloa drug cartels that was happening there that just made it even more difficult to think about going back there. And so St. James really became our home. In terms of what I've seen change from the time that I was 9 years old when I arrived to St. James to now, has really taken, and it's been a work of 30 years in the making, of how small towns really either adapt or don't adapt or embrace the new cultures that come to the small towns. In St. James, when we first arrived, there was the obvious resistance. There was a lot of pushback. There was a lot of farmers that had been there for generations asking, who are these people? What are they doing here? The majority of the folks that were coming were from Mexico. Now we have a large percentage of people from Honduras and Guatemala. And also a lot of recruitment happened in the southern states of Texas and Arizona. I think one of the stories that I want to share in terms of like the contrast of where we have been and now is in 2006 there was a huge march of at that point known as Day Without an Immigrant. I'm not sure if many of you remember that as really an opportunity to highlight the need for immigration reform at that point. And so the idea behind that, the sentiment behind that was to really show one day the impact that immigrants have in this country by not showing up to work. And this is my activist self in high school saying, well, I'm not going to go to school and I'm going to stay home to really show that we are needed and we are deserving of being here just as much as anybody else. And so we organized a small little march in St. James, Minnesota. Mind you, it's a small rural town of about 4,000 people. So when I say downtown, I literally mean like 3 blocks. And we organized a small march at that point really to showcase that. And we had students drive in their trucks with Confederate flags as we were doing a peaceful march back and forth. And that is really like what we were dealing with at that point in James, really not knowing how to engage the Latino community, even though the community had been there as early as 1960s, 1970s, but very, very much had been working in silos for a really long time. Now, St. James, I would say, has, there was a recent article of St. James in the news really recently of how much of the work that it's taken for a community to really embrace one another, and due to a lot of community organizers, due to a lot of really folks in the other communities coming forward and curiously asking, we want to connect, we don't know how do we make this work? More than 50% of our elementary schools and schools in St. James are Latino. We have, the reason why downtown St. James is currently thriving is because of the many restaurants of our, Mexican immigrants, and also the stores are occupied and owned by Mexican and Latino immigrants, or Latinos themselves, that have really made small communities thrive again. And so, because of a lot of organizing, La Convivencia Hispana, which is a nonprofit that was started a few years ago because of the need to really figure out how does a small town work together, started organizing and developing different programming that engaged the different communities in St. James to really show, what it is to embrace different cultures. All that to say, I wanted to highlight rural and greater Minnesota because oftentimes, we hear history of the metro area, we hear history of the contributions of Mexicans here, but we also have to remember that Mexicans and immigrants exist, and Latinos exist in greater Minnesota, and we are really making huge contributions in those small towns, and we will continue to do so as Minnesota continues to be a more brown and black state. In terms of myself, I, as I mentioned, grew up in St. James. I am also part of the undocumented Dreamer movement. I am proud recipient and fortunate and privileged recipient of DACA and currently working as the executive director of Latino Lead, which is a nonprofit that advances Latinx collective. The main focus is leadership development. Thank you.
And next we'll hear from Rebecca Starsky.
Thank you. Good morning. Morning, almost afternoon. Yes, my name is Rebecca Starsky, and I wear many hats. My husband and I came to Rochester in 1991, and we began our family. Fast forwarded to now, and we had 7 children, and they are all spread out. I have one that went to the Navy, wanting to serve this country, so he is in Norfolk, Virginia. I have another one who is a deputy sheriff in Olmsted County Sheriff's Department. I have 2 other daughters. One is in theater, one is into graphic design, and I have 3 younger ones. One that is in Boston University, just started, and he wants to go for music composition, and 2 more they're trying to figure out what they want to do. But that's my husband and my contribution to the state of Minnesota so far. But no, my husband is a teacher, a Spanish teacher at Century High School in Rochester. And we truly believe in family. That was one of the things that we try to instill in our children, the beauty of family, the beauty of working together, the beauty of helping others. Currently, I'm working for the Minnesota Department of Human Services, and my job is going out there to communities and hearing from them their experiences with case management services. Case management services are being redesigned in Minnesota, so we want to go out there and hear their experiences receiving that service. I previously worked for the Chicano Latino Affairs Council at that time, now Minnesota Council on Latino Affairs. Originally, when you said Culiacan, I said, yeah, I'm from Mazatlan, which is 2 hours south of Culiacan, so Sinaloa is represented very well here. So, woohoo! So my husband and I decided to stay in Rochester. I also work for the Rochester Public Schools, and I helped the special ed department, and I was going out to test young children that if they needed any special help. I was helping with making sure that they would go through the test and so on, and if they needed services, they would get them. I also opened a business in Rochester in 2008, and that's, I think, not because I did it, but it just happened that it was in 2008 when we went into recession. And as you know, a lot of Latinos were the ones that were taking all the risks and were opening up business. And that was, at that time, the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce told me that we Latinos were the ones that were opening up businesses at that time. So that's another contribution of our Latino community. I am also a community supporter, organizer, whatever you want to call me, because I'm out there. I'm currently a commissioner for the Rochester Police Policy Oversight Commission, and our job is to connect our communities with the police department and making sure that we're building relationships, and I think that has worked really well, and want to build the trust of our Latino community to go up to police and for police to accept the consular ID, which they do, and report crimes, because our communities are not reporting crimes that they are victims of. And so we are telling them, please report anything that you are suffering from, or if you're a victim of a crime. I am also president of the board of directors of the Alliance of Chicano Hispanics and Latin Americans in Rochester. So we are a small nonprofit. When you were talking about rural versus urban, we suffer from that. because many of the services are, or the funding for those small organizations stay in the metro area. And we don't get that in the rural areas. And Rochester people don't consider us as rural, but yes, we are. So we struggle with that, and so we're a bunch of Latino volunteers that are there to help our community. We support the Mexican consulate when they come with a mobile consulate, and we've done Know Your Rights. We've invited LCM to come and talk to the community while the consulate is having their mobile consulate. Another thing that I am very passionate about is in the area of diversity and inclusion. I am a board member for the Cultural and Ethnic Communities Leadership Council for the Minnesota Department of Human Services. We advise the Commissioner of Human Services on issues related to disparities in human services and in health, and looking at all the determinants of health, and so we advise the Commissioner of that. I am very proud that I also brought the Intercultural Cities Initiative to Rochester, and now Rochester is considered the first intercultural cities in the United States. It's a Council of Europe program, and so we're going right now through the index, which is an analysis, and I believe Mexico City is an intercultural cities, and Toronto is as well another intercultural cities, but we got to be first. Mayo and Rochester likes to be first, so we have to be first. So anyway, one of the things that I am very passionate about, or another, is for us to tell our own story. We have to tell our own story. We cannot allow others to tell it for us. I like to collaborate with other organizations and to work on common interests. And I've done it through the work at the Minnesota Council of Latino Affairs that I did previously. And for me, and a very wise man, one day told me that if you're not on the table, you are on the menu. So we have to be part of all of these things that we all are doing, because it's an opportunity for us to tell our story and an opportunity to not be on the menu. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. I suspect you must have more hours in the day than most of us, because I'm not sure how you accomplished all of that. Our last panelist is Rodolfo Gutierrez, who is the Executive Director of ACER, which, in case you don't know, stands for Hispanic Advocacy and Community Empowerment Through Research. Hacer is also the Spanish word for to realize, to make, or to do, which is a very apt description of his organization.
Thank you. So I'm going to stand up because as Ambassador Davida, I learned that if I don't move, everybody can fall asleep when I am speaking. So I'm going to try to avoid that. And I've been teaching here at the U for quite a while, and I am back to this auditorium. I was teaching here like 10 years ago, and it was fantastic. So I feel really glad coming back here. Thank you so much for the opportunity. But I am feeling disappointed because I didn't see my mustache in the pictures. So I feel now neglected, but I'll survive. Well, what I was going to say about ACER is already done, so I want to talk about myself. I came here 20 years ago with the goal of completing my PhD in history. My idea was to do it in 3 years, or less, because sometimes, you know, the dissertation takes your time. And well, now I have counted 20 winters already coming to Minnesota. And thinking that the next winter maybe we're going to see the Vikings going to the Super Bowl, and that'll be making things easier. But no, it's not going to happen. So, I came here with my family. I'm from Mexico City originally, but I do have two kids, one is from Oaxaca. She born in Oaxaca when we were living there, and the other one is from Tijuana because we were also moving to Tijuana. And that said, my wife is also from Mexico City, and when we were studying both for our master's degrees at the Colegio de Mexico, we met each other. So we were, in a way, a nomad family who came here to the north of the north, close to Canada and the Penguins, to study, trying to learn something different. And we certainly learned something different. First, that we needed to be more open-minded, because when we came here in 1998, it was very difficult even to find tortillas in any store. And the most famous store in town was El Burrito Mercado in West St. Paul. And it was kind of a burden needing to go there, because if you don't have a car here, especially in winter, it's kind of difficult. The other thing I learned is that so many people here believe that eating Mexican food was going to Taco Bell. Quite not true, sorry. But today, things are very different, because you can go not only to eat tacos to Los Ocampo or to Taco Taxi in Minneapolis, but you also can find several options of high cuisine coming from Mexicans who are bringing their cuisines here. Nowadays, you can find several businesses led by people who are Mexicans or Latinos even, mostly Mexicans. And you know that today we are reported by the Census Bureau as being around 300,000 people of Latino origin, and almost 270,000 of them Mexicans, according to the census. According to few Hispanics, we are 100,000 more, all of them undocumented. Well, we don't know, because they are not counted properly. But we are that many Mexican people living here, so we are more and more visible. Today, there is no county in Minnesota without any person of Latino origin, and I am pretty sure they are Mexicans, especially those two who are in International Falls. Yes, there are two Mexicans. And every single county in Minnesota now counts Latinos. So that is really important for me. And as a historian also, I get involved in a non-profit organization that is there 10 years ago to work with the community, for the community, and trying to make things like more easy for them to understand, in a way also to provoke them to get engaged, civically speaking, and why not politically speaking. We've been trying to do that, and it's been not easy. But I've learned a lot of things, like for example, as Patricia was saying before, our history of Mexicans in Minnesota is over 160 years now. In 1860, when it was the first census taken here before the division of the territory of Wisconsin, they counted 2 Mexicans. 5 years later, they were 4. They grew 100%. And then they figured out that they were the children of the 2 first Mexicans here, because they didn't have many options. There was no Super Bowl yet. But yeah, since then, the presence of the Mexicans or Latino population has been constant in Minnesota, but also somehow not really understood, not really looked at carefully. And by the 1920s, the Mexicans were really important for the economy of the state, because by then, the exploitation of beets, sugar beets, was really important, and a lot of people were invited to come from Mexico to work in the sugar beets fields. And they were working there and losing their arms, their legs, their feet, their fingers, because no one else wanted to do that job. It's very risky. So thousands of people were working in the sugar beets fields. During the Second World War, Minnesota was favored because a lot of people wanted to go to the Programa Bracero to Chicago, from Mexico to Chicago, but they were not enough employment offered for them, so many of them moved down to Illinois, to the state of Illinois entirely, but also to Iowa and Minnesota. So we do have a large influx of people who came here, and they started working not only on the fields, but also in the cities. And since then, it started to grow kind of a local economy that was becoming very dynamic and diverse. So since the 40s, we can say the economy is widely sustained by immigration from Mexico in Minnesota. Furthermore, today we do have a switch in demographic terms. I am also a demographer. So the population here in Minnesota is going older and older. So the oldest is getting, the needs are growing. So I see myself in, I'm not so short-term, I guess, but needing some assistance. And with that said also is that today we do have this imbalance with the white population, which is younger and preparing themselves to serve the older people. Because there are less people who are going to schools being white. And we do have a lot of people of color. I don't like much of, because white is also a color, isn't it? So people of color are in larger kind of possibilities in number of going to schools because they are younger. So among them, today, Latino population has a median age of 24 years of age. So we are young in general. The white population is 38 years of age by median. So we do have the need of seeing this young population as an investment we need to do in order to have better kind of opportunities of maintaining the situation we do have and enjoy in Minnesota. Because so many people say Minnesota is the best state in the country. Some others say it's the second, but being the first or the second is going to be difficult in the long term if we don't do something. And today, the economy, local economies are very important. Not less yesterday at the Star Tribune, wonderful article published, talked about Worthington City. The mayor was telling us about how important is the presence of Mexicans, Latinos in the local economy, which otherwise will be just lost. We will be having Worthington City as a ghost town because almost half of the population is of Latino origin. And that is really important. So that said, I was invited to talk about the importance of in economic and arts and all that, but Tina just illustrated the arts, so wonderful. And you can go also to the Distrito del Sol, and you'll see there are several murals and artistic interpretations. And not only telling you about pictures or paintings or murals, but also the history of Latinos here in Minnesota. And when I was looking at some of the pictures, I saw the Brown Berets, who was a movement here in the University of Minnesota, led by Mexican people, associated with the civil rights movement in the United States. So Mexicans are everywhere, but we haven't been noticed. So it's time for us to really look at the Latino culture, the majority of us Mexicans, and embrace it as a possibility for us to maintain a good standpoint, being the first or the second state in the nation, but also to be better. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Rodolfo. You know, the viewpoints of our panels that were just expressed perfectly encapsulates the main point I wanted to address, and that is that, you know, there's a long-standing Mexican community in Minnesota, and yes, they are dairy workers and meat packers and farmers, but they're also doctors and engineers and professors and journalists and artists and, you know, every stripe, and yet, the image in Minnesota is fixed on the former. And I want to hear from our panelists, how do we enlarge that vision, you know, without, you know, dismissing those, but also, you know, get people to understand, you know, how broad the contributions are and how far they range. So who would like to go first?
Well, I think when it comes to contributions to Mexicans and Latinos to Minnesota and in the U.S. in general, I think that the tool that I have used in my scholarship is in the arts. And the reason is because I think I can reach more people. printmaking was created as a means to distribute lots of images at a time. And then I also think that trying to get people to come together, a lot of times it's community-based and celebratory, and so you can find ways to draw people in. I don't know my microphone. Sorry. Yeah, so I'm sorry. But if you can find ways to gather people together, something that they have in common, maybe it's food, maybe it's art, but I think that way they become more open, because I think one of the biggest obstacles to understanding each other is simply the isolation.
And have you found that easier over time? I mean, like with OFO, I came here in the 90s, and there were very few images of, I mean, you couldn't find a mural outside of West St. Paul. You didn't really see Mexican art, and I do see it more and more now. So has it become easier to get installations, to get a presence at the Minnesota Art Institute?
I think there's an effort being made, but we have a long ways to go.
Long way to go.
So that's why I've been working with, especially with the museums and such, and trying to find out ways to draw the community in as well to see. For instance, there's an exhibit right now at the Minneapolis Institute of Arts of a Mexican photographer, and we've been trying to do programming around that to draw in not just the Minnesota communities, but the Latino communities who might not be visiting these establishments.
And anybody else, how do we expand that vision and heighten that presence so that Minnesotans have a greater understanding of what this community is about?
So, I mean, that is one of the reasons why, really at the core of the organization that I'm a part of, Latino Lead, was started. I think oftentimes we know of our own contributions because we are the ones working in all these spaces, and oftentimes it's about like connecting each other and really getting to know where we are, which is one of the things that Latino Lead really tries to do, to collect, us as Latinos in general from all different sectors to come together and really network, but also like learn about the different and awesome things that our communities are doing. And I think one of the things too is making sure that we are taking our narrative back, as Frida was mentioning, on ensuring that we are really the ones that own our narratives and our stories, and highlighting not only the stories of our past and making sure that we keep those stories of our elders that have paved the way, but also like how do we also include the stories of our emerging leaders, of our emerging and really new and younger workforce, and that's definitely something that I've seen a little bit more about, but it's something that we should and need to continue to highlight in terms of our own narrative to build that bridge.
I think that it starts with us. And also it starts with us telling our children. Having 7 children, I am passionate for youth and for our little ones. And I think that it needs to come from us. And I know that the rhetoric that they hear or the situations that they face in school sometimes is not good, but we need to tell them that they are valued and they are contributors, and see us fight for them as well. And I think that when we start with us, when it starts with us and our families, I think we're able to move that along, because it's like a domino effect. And then they have a good sense of themselves, great self-esteem, and then they can take it forward, whether they are from Mexico, whether they're from Guatemala, whether they are from wherever, that they are valued and awesome contributors to our state and our economy.
Yes, at that point, it's really important not only to work with ourselves, but also to demand the different authorities, different kind of people involved in education, in different policies in housing, to work with us in a different way, because I remember one of the study we did is like asking people about their opportunities in education, and one student came up and said, when I was trying to see what was going to be my future in education, the counselor in my high school told me, well, you know what, maybe 2 years technical college, but don't be too optimistic. And he said, why? Well, because you're Latino, so you have limitations by nature. That told me that that person is not well prepared, is not well informed, is not really aware about the value he's taking out of that food, and also not really doing anything in favor of really impulsing or promoting that kind of movement. And we need to demand that change as well. So it's working with us, but also working with other people in different political and economic and making decisions spheres for us to really change things. And that's important.
I just want to say one quick example. Something that there's an early childhood education initiative, Cradle to Career in Rochester, and I have told them, please do not do this without us. Please have, because they're trying
Do
to
it with us, not to us, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're trying to work and make sure that children are at a young age that they learn to read and write and all of that, and work in the disparities, but is from everybody else's perspective, not from our perspective. And so I said, please don't make decisions without us.
Very important. We have so many good questions from our audience, and I want to get to as many as I can. I'm afraid in my limited amount of time I won't be able to, but I will try. So one comes from, and this is directed to either Irma or Rebecca. It says, as an immigrant, I can tell that Minnesota Nice is real, but how often or severe are the racist activities against the Mexican communities in the rural area of the state? And I know we were all pretty horrified about that story from Worthington with a bus driver who couldn't even bear to say good morning to the brown-skinned children that came on board his bus. And I know that's not entirely reflective of Worthington, but it does happen. Could you please speak to that?
I think that, I mean, we have different examples of the different things, and oftentimes they are those, and they should be highlighted even more than they are now. But it's also part of the different spaces that I've seen many small communities go through as they're really trying to figure out really how to really embrace this beautiful change in rural and greater communities. And so I think it's important to talk about them, and it's important to really acknowledge the fact that they are there. And you know, from my time and personal experience living in St. James, you know, not only like the violence from community members, but you know, the raids that come oftentimes within those different communities, you know, violent crimes in schools of like teachers, similar to what Rolfo was saying, that happens, that discourage us from really seeing ourselves as, and really without any support to really make it and live a dignified life in those areas. And so I think that from what I've experienced, I know that they exist. I know that different communities are doing different things to make those better and really bridge those gaps. But we have a lot of work to do, and it really takes both our own communities to create you know, spaces for ourselves to really voice and demand needs for changes, but also the community itself, and really realizing, right, like I think communities are in a pinpoint right now where it's like either we're going to embrace this community or we're really going to try to do the same things that we've been doing for generations and generations, and oftentimes it's going to come to a point where actually it's not going to work that way anymore. And so it's really about those two communities realizing and coming together in terms, but at the same time, like working within our own communities to demand the different changes, and really focusing on the different you know, thriving things that our communities do, and highlighting more stories like that.
I have a story to mention about that, and I mentioned it yesterday at a meeting with Ambassador Bárcena and Consul Guerrero. And there was this young girl in high school, so she wasn't in a math class, and she answered the question that the teacher asked, and she was wrong. And then the white girl next to her said, "Oh, don't worry, mates don't need math, don't need to know math. So that girl mentioned that to her dad, and her dad called me and said, this happened at a high school in Rochester. And so he told me the high school, and I know the principal because my kids go to that high school. And I called him and said, Mr. Olson, this happened, and what are you going to do about it? We need to stand up. I see a lot of our Latino community that walk with their hand, with the face looking down. I don't like that, because I tell them, please raise your head and keep it held high, because you are here, you're contributing, you are a member of our community and you're valued. So Mr. Olson said, oh, I am so sorry, we do train our teachers, because that was the first thing that I asked him. I said, I hope this teacher, I hope he didn't hear it, and I'm gonna think the best of the teacher, that he didn't hear it, but if he did, he didn't do anything. So then I was able to connect this father and the principal, and they were gonna connect and talk about what happened. And I'm very, very happy to hear that there is an infrastructure that is being built for these things to be reported. And because we would tend to say, well, it happened, well, what are you gonna do? No, we need to speak up and to say, no, you're not. No, I am not, and I will raise my head because I am a member of this community. And my conversations with mayors, with representatives, and I said, our Latino community contributes to the state, and we belong here. We are here, and we love it, and we want to work with you, but please respect us as a community.
Bill, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Well, yeah, I understood it was a question for them too, but yeah, I guess we are always in the risk. My son himself studied at the State of Colorado, and 2 years ago it was an incident in which a group came into the campus and then painted some offensive statements against immigrants on the walls. It was some situation really uncomfortable because we might not expect that happening in a university campus, in a college. So that's telling you that you don't really see perhaps on your daily life what is in there. And that we need to really be aware about that. And as Rebecca was mentioning, knowing what to do in those cases and announce them. Because if we start saying, well, that happens, and that is a thing that we go through with immigrants in the United States, that doesn't help. And perhaps we need to change the Minnesota nice to Minnesota nicer. And start working towards that.
That would be a good start. I'm going to contribute my own little bit of myth busting here. That you may or may not know, of the almost 200,000 Mexicans who live in Minnesota, at least 60% of them were born here.
Right.
And that is another, I think, myth that we need to take aim at, is that this is not a community. There are undocumented, but there are many who are born here and they are citizens and proud members of both, countries. So I want to ask one more question here. I'm actually going to sneak in a combination with another one here, because I think they're both short. If you could speak to the communities and attitudes regarding the census and what is being done in terms of outreach to Latin and Mexican communities and some of the tensions surrounding that, and then also in a related question, whatever tensions there might be between documented and undocumented Mexican immigrants, which I think is something that doesn't really get talked about a lot.
I'm going to take this. I am a passionate of the census. Our organization is a complete counting committee. So we truly believe that everybody has to be counted. Everybody, it doesn't matter your condition. But we also recognize that we've been trying to outreach with populations that are really scared about it, because especially all the jargon coming out from the presidency telling them that they're going to be asked about the citizenship status and all that, really scared a lot of people. Today we go to houses and they are really thinking of not really saying anything, even though they might be documented, because they fear that the parents would be affected if they are undocumented. So they try to hide that information.
So even those born here are reluctant to be counted for fear of giving away relatives?
They don't want to talk about in the census because they say, I need to report my father who's living with me and he's undocumented. So they are afraid of that consequences, and today is going to be a challenge for everybody. We were talking on this with Rosa Tuck, who is the executive director for Minnesota Council of Latino Affairs, on coming together, organizations, Latino organizations led, and working together on generating more effective outreach exercise with the population. And also, well, regarding the school retention, we have lowest retention rate in the state of Minnesota, only behind the Native Americans. Regardless if they are documented or undocumented, it is a big problem. But it is less among documented immigrants because most of them, the people who are documented, they do have a background that helps them better to stay at school. That is also positive, and many of Latinos nowadays are coming well prepared, coming from South America, for example, with parents who are already educated and all that, so they are just promoting that. Their kids study at the end. But the retention rate is very low for Latinos in general. Many reasons. The economic reason is very, very high still, because even though many Mexicans or Latinos work here in Minnesota, they are having very low incomes. And then they demand some support from their kids where they are able to work. And that happens when they finish or complete either the first, second year of high school. So they are called to come and work.
Are you all still finding, or are you finding that the message that there will not be a citizenship question on the census, is that getting out to people? Do they understand that? So,
I'm also president of the board of Immigrant Law Center in Minnesota. The conversations with the team has always been very similar, right? Like there is more risk of our communities not being counted, documented, specifically undocumented. Even my family is asking me like how do I answer this, or like what does this really mean? It's like the messaging has always been there is more risk of not being counted. Because what happens is that there is lack, then you lose representation and you lose really resources and funding that are needed to be in those communities where we need to be counted. And so the message definitely has been very crystal clear on making sure that our community knows that the risk is higher for not being counted, but also like the reassuring that there isn't misinformation happening and continues to happen, because we know that it is a tactic of fear of having this even be a subject, right? Of like making sure that people know that it is a tactic to encourage our communities not to continue to voice ourselves, and definitely there are many different communities and organizations that are trying to combat that, and we are definitely trying to think of better ways to ensure that the messaging is informative and clear, and we really share with the community that we need to be counted.
But I also think, I just want to comment, and I'm not sure where they have decided or designed the next census, but a big challenge is the terminology that I was talking about, the classifications in my artwork, and the fact that they use the term Hispanic, and maybe a lot of communities, such as in Minnesota, there's the term Latino is probably more common, and then they want to divide up ethnicity and race, and so you're required to choose between white, black, and indigenous, is what I understand, and I don't know if that's changed, and the majority of Mexicans, for instance, are mestizo, but I don't think that's a term that's necessarily prevalent or used, and so then we're left without an ability to choose how to be common.
That's not something I thought of before, but that's interesting.
That's why I proudly say my race is Chilanga.
There's a few of us here.
Well, I'm afraid we are out of time. Did you
want to, first say that I'm very proud of the Mexican community. They are really great, and as you can see, they are an important part of Minnesota. But second, it's just to underline that for the Mexican embassy, the network of Mexican consulates, and working very closely with the U.S. authorities, census, to be counted in census is one of the priorities. So we are already working with the federal authorities. We have instructed the consulates to do and to promote that the Mexican community is counted in the census. We're working with the federal authorities, not just to underline and give again and again the guarantees that the information in the census will not be used for other purposes. So to create the trust that is needed to answer. But also we know that the census presents some challenges because you need to explain very well how first you have the option of answering it through internet. If not, then you can answer it in writing, and if not, if people goes to your home. And so we are going to work on this. We are already organizing a set of webinars with the census authorities, with NALEO, which is a federal organization that is much more involved in the issue of Census 2020, and that as far as we can, the Mexican community in Minnesota will receive all the support of the consulate for this issue, and not only for this issue, but in general for the issues that affect the Mexican community, because we are very proud of them, and I think that the U.S. and Minnesota is also very proud of them, so we need to work together.
Thank you, Ambassador, for those important additions. And please thank our panelists.
Thank our whole panel.